It's time for the talk of the Northwest, the 9 to Noon Show with Greg Hughes on Highland Radio.
Good morning. You are very welcome along to the 9 till Noon Show here in Highland Radio. 4 minutes past 9, and it is Friday the 17th of May, and we have assembled our Friday panel for you, and they are Professor Curran, Professor of Cybersecurity at Ulster University. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Greg.
Thank you very much for coming in. Also, Lorraine Thompson, Regional Director with the Donegal Youth Services. Good morning to you, Lorraine.
Good morning, Greg.
And, of course, Mary Hart, broadcaster and journalist. Mary, thanks so much for coming back.
Good morning.
We've a lot to get through. I might just start, if you don't mind, with yesterday all the papers were sure Donald Trump was coming to visit Ireland. Today they are not so sure. Sinn Féin were on the news this morning saying that they're going to publicly oppose his visit, protest his visit. I'm just curious to get your opinion, given the fact that, of course, you know, we welcome tourists from America of all persuasion to this county alone, maybe 8,500 jobs supported by that. What kind of a message, if any at all, would it send out to those potential tourists if we have organised and politically supported protests against their president, whether you like him or loathe him, visiting Ireland? Mary, what do you think?
Well, I don't think anybody in America would even notice. I don't think the media in America would even notice whether Donald Trump comes to Ireland or whether he doesn't.
Do you think so?
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be a little corner in some of the newspapers, and that'll be about it. It's not a big issue. It's not a big event. His coming to Ireland, I see now that, or at least I heard this morning, that it may not now be happening. Because he's a bit miffed because the Taoiseach won't rightly so meet him at the golf course, so they now would wanted a neutral location. So I think his reasons for coming to Ireland is to do with his own golf club. He's never, I think, actually been there and played there. And it is making him, I think it went from being valued at 5 million to 15 million. It's making him a couple of million every year, so why would he not come? But I mean, and as Leo Varadkar said, he wasn't asking people not to protest. That's their right, as it is their right. And I think, Donald Trump, there are protests all over America about him, so why would there not be protests in Ireland? I personally don't think it makes one bit of a difference. It won't make one bit of a difference to my life or anybody else's life in Ireland, whether he comes or he doesn't come. And I don't think it'll have any, it will not be splashed over the main headlines in all the newspapers across America that Donald Trump has gone to Scotland instead of Ireland, because to be honest,
that's one state instead of another compared to over there.
I think they think Ireland and Scotland are the one place.
Lorraine Thompson, you're nodding as Mary's speaking.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with it all. It's such a big difference from when we had the like of Barack Obama here, and I think the welcome was extended up and down the country for him. I think Trump is used to people protesting. I think that it nearly gives him extra sass whenever he's out and about and people are protesting. I think it's that notion of no such thing as kind of bad publicity for him. So, yeah, it has been talked about quite a number of times, I believe, his visit to Ireland, and every time he gets the same reaction, and nobody can forget that big baby balloon that they had over London. Now, I don't know if maybe the protests here would go that far.
But it was due in Dublin the last time he were due here, but that never happened either. Kevin, does your view differ in any way to Mary and Lorraine's?
Not different. I think he's thin-skinned, actually. I think he is upset by, he wants to be glorified and loved and adored. But I would be sad if he doesn't come. I think it's good for tourism. It's just good for the country. Whether or not you agree with his politics. And, of course, there's a lot about his character, which, again, I can only assess from what I read about and what I observe, because I don't know the guy personally. But there's a lot about him which is flawed. But not all his policies I disagree with. There's a lot of things he does which are fine, because sometimes I'm on the right, sometimes I'm on the left, so I don't disagree with the guy totally. But I think for the country, it would be better if he comes. It's better for relations, it's better for investment, it's better for just everything, because there's so many countries which have issues with him, so I would prefer if he's just given, space when he comes, and, if you have a problem with him, just stay away.
So you would be opposed to protests?
I'm opposed to protests. I mean, I prefer there's no process. I think people should get on with their lives.
Yeah. On that, so it's a welcome visit, though, if he does come.
Well, of course, any foreign leader that comes into Ireland is to be welcomed. It means that we're an important island, an important country, an important world player in areas of economics. But we shouldn't forget that Donald Trump is keeping the Irish out of America in a big way.
And everybody else.
I mean, if you could build a wall around the edges of the Atlantic, maybe that might help as well. But, that's...
There's a strong political movement in this country to that end as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that believe that, Irish... this all goes right back to Eamon de Valera anyway, and John Kennedy agreeing that the immigrants had to be stopped leaving the brain drain out of Ireland to America. And so the limited number of people giving working visas to America was begun in the 60s. Before that, you could have gone and went off to America.
But in fairness, it's not Donald. It's their policy for years. They have to control immigration. Most countries do.
Nobody was building a wall around Mexico.
Yeah, but we lock up people coming into this country in detention centres, effective detention centres.
Well, that's...
What's the difference between the people
America's
we're locking up?
America's a massive country. America was built by people going from other countries into it and taking over and making it into the country that it is. It has the ability to be, to soak up a lot of people. And America goes into other countries as well. Make no mistake about that either. And people could say interferes and in wars and takes, part in a country that perhaps they should stay out of unless they're asked to come in. But there's to equate people coming into Ireland, generally speaking, that are coming in are turned away if they have not got a visa to come into this country. If they're refugees, then they have a right to be brought into the country, and they are the people that are then in the holding centres. We're not arresting people, locking them up because they're trying to come into Ireland.
Yeah, but Irish people are going into America to try and go over there and work, and they are over there working illegally.
Illegal is a term that you could say people are actually working there. They're working and paying their tax in America, even though
to society,
they're not,
Okay.
And a country like America has
sugarcoat it by calling them undocumented, where they are illegal immigrants.
They are.
That means there's no point.
And they've been there for generations, and I think they've contributed.
Doesn't make them any less illegal, though. Is my point. When we're talking about our border laws, what's your view, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a difficult one because every country has to control who they let in. Of course, we think that all Irish people are honest, and but all the countries that we might have problems with also believe that they are as well. So again, it's usually you're looking at your own race and you're just judging. But again, there is controls there, and I do find the Mexican wall. I find that a bit naive, the actual physical wall, because nowadays countries face really cyberspaces where you want to build defences. Yeah, of course they have to control that part of the land really, but I think they just should have increased maybe the drones and the patrols they had at the moment, because a physical wall, I mean, it's like everywhere. You're only as strong as your weakest defence. And that wall it's too long to protect that border. We're not talking about muffin. It's just so large.
And it presumes people wouldn't have the ingenuity to get through it or over it if they were so inclined. But
there's also the issue that immigrants build a country. Immigrants are the ones that will work. Immigrants won't be the ones that be lying around drawing benefits and sapping money out of the system. A lot of the people that are in our provision centres want to work and want to contribute. We don't permit them to do so. That's our fault. Yeah. That's our fault.
But I think that shouldn't be happening. System that we have. I mean, they are being processed through a system. They're brought into Ireland to be processed through a system. It's the delays in the system.
So this goes right back to my very point, right? At the start, is that we're protesting Donald Trump and his policies, and giving a cursory sort of mention to the fact that we're doing really quite similar, albeit on a smaller scale.
But it's more than his policies on building a wall, Greg. I mean, what about his attitudes towards women, for example? I mean, he's brought that argument back hundreds of years in terms of his attitude towards women. So for me personally, it's not just about the wall.
It's more to it.
It's much more than that. It's his whole character.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what side, I suppose, of the political spectrum that you're from. Yeah, he certainly wouldn't be anywhere next nor near my spectrum. I just think he's crass, he's right wing, he's bad. Now, that's not to say there are people who say that some of his policies have worked. Of course, everybody's policy works for whatever section you want it to work for. So I just think the man should never have been leader of the so-called free world.
But he was voted that way, wasn't he?
He was.
Right, okay. People very engaged on that, and it's fun sometimes what people do get engaged on. The referendum, it's like it's not happening on May 24th for an awful lot of people. It's quite important to many, though. It's to shorten effectively the waiting period from 4 years to 2 years. It's hard for us to debate it because there's no one really necessarily opposing it. But are people engaged in this, Lorraine Thompson? Are people going to be going out and voting it? Should people be engaged with just one of those things that, people accept it, it's going to pass and so be it?
I think so, Greg. I think people have accepted that it's going to pass. I think that's how it should be. I mean, we've had divorce here in Ireland since 1995, and the most recent opinion poll in relation to this is saying that I think it's going to have maybe 8% of a no vote. I think people are engaged in the topic, certainly in terms of conversations that I have had, and for a lot of people it's a no-brainer that there's no reason to oppose it. They're happy to go in and give their vote. Obviously it's the local elections maybe it's taken a bit more of the spotlight at this stage, and maybe to some degree then the European elections. But in terms of this divorce referendum, I think it's a huge change from previous referendums people have got really passionate about in previous referendums. So I think in this instance, I think it's as it should be. People are given the opportunity to change the constitution, and this one is going to go through.
Mary, you agree?
Absolutely. We wouldn't be having this if we didn't have a constitution that has all morals written into it, and because divorce was not in our constitution, we had to change the constitution to have divorce. If you were in the UK, that wouldn't have to happen. So every little footstep that has to do with whatever was in the constitution has got to go through a referendum. There should be no need for this to have a referendum and change it. Most people who are seeking divorce have been well separated before they get next or near a court. The onus is on solicitors to ask the applicant if they're prepared to go into mediation, or if the marriage is over and done. So if the marriage is over and they've been separated and they go to court, by the time they get to court, pretty much everything's gone anyway. So the having to wait for 4 years is very unfair in my view, because the person can't remarry until if they've been living apart for 4 years before they can get the proper divorce. They will have the first stage, which is a legal separation, so that the marriage is gone, the basics have been divvied out or whatever has to be split between the people, and all of that's been worked through. So to have to wait for 4 years then to get the piece of paper that says you are divorced so that you can get married again has been wrong, and it's long overdue to come along to this stage. It should have happened right away.
Professor Curran, sorry,
it's another technicality, as you say. It's an addendum or an add-on to the existing divorce laws.
And I think that's really kind of why it seems to be universally sort of agreed with, Kevin.
Yeah.
I agree. I was surprised this was a referendum. To me, a referendum is like, should we have divorce or not? Should we leave, the European Union? Large questions. To me, this is like a clause in already approved that divorce can happen, and it's going down to a number of years. And why do we have elections? So we vote politicians in to make decisions, and of course they'll make decisions, with a keen eye on what their constitution, voters would like. So why can't they make this decision? Why can't they come to? Well,
it's because it's in the Constitution, and anything that's in the Constitution must be changed by referendum. They can't.
But this changes that now. I mean, I think really from a time to introduce this in the first place and to get enough people to vote in favour of it, it would have had to have gone in with caveats. It's the same with the repeal the 8th referendum, dates and times and barriers and this, that and the other. And it seems in the first instance...
We just need a new constitution, basically, that is not as detailed and as moralistic as the one we have, which causes all of these problems when it comes to changes.
Staying with the local elections, how's your level of engagement with it, Mary? I'll start with you. Are you finding it interesting? Are you finding it any different? I'm pleasantly surprised with the interest in our debates and the level of interaction with them. and the feedback we're getting from them. But generally speaking, out and about, what are you feeling? Do people push by this, or are they just going to go out and vote if they can be so inclined for the person that lives closest to them?
That's probably local elections are very, very local, and generally speaking, people who are voting personally know the candidate, as opposed to the general elections or presidential elections in this country. You may never have met your local politician, but local elections, it's the guy next door, it's the guy across the street, or it's the man that you see around the place, or woman. I shouldn't say man. The engagement, I personally don't think it's as vibrant as it was. I mean, I was a child when my father went into politics.
Is that apathy amongst the public?
I think nowadays people use social media to get the message across, or they're on radio to get the message across. They're not I haven't seen anybody at my door, and mind you, I live out in the country, so the tendency is not to go too much into the in-depth countryside, but to stick to the urban areas, knocking on doors. I do think also that people are fed up with people knocking on the doors and handing them leaflets. And I once worked in a government department when the head of the department said to me, by the way, all of those promises that were made during the election campaign, they should be declared null and void the 3 weeks during an election campaign, because nothing will ever come of it, because as we all know, politicians will promise you everything. They will tell you that they've been working hard for you for the last X number of years, that they're the only person that has ever done such and such a thing. And I mean, there's a few things that have come, across my path, and I say, I don't actually remember that ever happening, or I don't actually remember that person ever doing this. So, everybody, I think, has a bit of that in them. There's a little bit of cynicism in all of us nowadays that may not have existed in previous
Kevin,
elections.
There? Oh, you're just breathing. Lorraine, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I was just, we were having a conversation about this earlier, and I just live on the outskirts of Letterkenny, and we've had a lot of leaflets thrown in the letterbox or handed to my kids when they're outside playing, which I think is curious, because I might be in the house and they've never asked, is your mum or dad in? And it's as if the canvassers don't want to speak to people.
So they're almost ticking that house box rather than actually engaging with you.
Yeah, and also I'm looking at the wealth of the candidates, for example. All the posters are up around the area, and there seems to be a good level of diversity. Certainly a lot more women, I think. And maybe it's just on my radio, there's a lot more women going forward, which I think is commendable. And then we have the existing, councillors coming back in for re-election. And it's interesting, I'm always looking at their manifestos. Obviously, I work in the youth service, so I'm looking to see how many of them have youth in their manifesto. Some of their manifestos let them down a lot. And I wonder, is that just a finance thing? Maybe if they're an independent candidate, they don't have the money. Certainly, I got one of the candidates in with a big, fancy, flashy brochure this week. And obviously, that's just that they have the finance to do that. So I hope people aren't maybe swayed by that. It would be good to talk to the candidates to see what's their reason for going forward. They obviously want to make a change. Some of them, a lot of them maybe don't have a political background. So it's just curious to me what has made them go forward. They've seen something that they haven't liked and they want to make a change. Maybe that makes them more enthusiastic.
When you go to the polling booth, what might motivate you in the way you vote? And I'm not looking for candidate's name, but I mean, would you look on? Are you looking on record, or you're saying, okay, there's a bit of diversity there, maybe there's an opportunity there, or maybe even, I might not necessarily agree with their politics, but maybe we can look at the agenda balance in the council. Would you be processing those thoughts?
All of those things, yeah. I mean, I think we need diversity. I think that's very important. I think we need enthusiasm and energy. So, we don't want the same old, same old. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll just get what you've always had, that kind of notion. So I think change is good, and I would welcome some of the ideas that I see in the manifestos. Those are things that people want. People want the town, they want changes in their local area. They want changes to policies and procedures. I'm always sceptical then when they go into power. Obviously, the cogs and the wheels maybe go that wee bit slower than.
And they realise then that it's not quite what you can do.
They get decisions made.
It is, Kevin, quite remarkable in our 30. And I'm not saying the councillors that have been there don't advocate for these people, of course, but 37 councillors, 8% are women. I don't believe there's any representation from the travelling community. There's no one for the LGBTQ plus community there. There's no one who would be. There's
one.
The one. Okay, sorry, I beg your pardon. There's one.
At least one that we know of, I should say.
Okay, right. But even proportionally, then we'll go down that road. Or even, you know, with a diverse background, maybe sort of one of the new Irish, for example. There is one as well.
One Doiba, yeah. Sorry.
No, I'm on about who's in the council.
Sorry.
Or current. Sorry, no.
Current
yeah,
election.
I was going to say right. No, those who are actually in the council, and I'm not saying they haven't advocated in the past. So, should we be looking for more diversity? Do you think voters should be looking down that road, or do what we always do and vote for who's closest to us?
Possibly, but I believe you should never vote for someone who puts himself up for, you know, really, we should conscript people in. You know, if someone wants to be in politics, you know, that's a red flag straight away. But no, I mean, some people come from political backgrounds and are born for the job, and they're good with the public and are as honest as anyone. But I suppose I just see the odd posters on the usual as I'm driving. I'm wondering how long will that last for? Are we nearing the end of seeing people's faces plastered on the roads as we drive? But it's funny, up around Derry, the one person I see all the time is Paul Canning's. And then I wonder, well, where are the other candidates? Where are their where are their placards? And are they putting money into the social media aspect? Are they really, you know, putting a lot onto the online, into the social media?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about that as well. First, it's interesting. You believe we shouldn't have elections which actually be trying to employ people that we think are best, like do interviews more or less.
No, I joke. I mean, it's an idea. It's like having a benevolent dictator. But you know, democracy doesn't work like that.
I haven't seen. You talked about people putting money in social media, unless it's just doing sponsored ads on Facebook or whatever. But I haven't really seen anyone catch my imagination from a social media perspective. Are you surprised in 2019 that that's not happening? That someone isn't coming out with something that's a little bit more...
But you don't know, because we're all living in filter bubbles.
Yeah, but I would be going outside my bubble too. Okay. I have a very diverse friends group, I will let you know, by the way, of all shades, all political persuasions and whatever. Those that love Fine Gael and those that can't abide them and so on and so forth. But I don't think anyone's really sort of taken social media and used it in any innovative way.
We don't know. We need to ask them, you know, I suppose you need to ask each candidate how much have they spent.
Well, spend would be different, of course.
Because all we know, you know, for all you know, maybe one of the candidates to spend, you know, 100,000 quid on a target in Snapchat. You know,
would we know? And would I be in that target? What are you pointing at me for? This is Snapchat. It's the only way I can communicate with my children. I have to have Snapchat.
It's important to be on Snapchat. No, I think we're intelligent enough.
The one problem I have with Snapchat, when I'm communicating with my children, is they take 5 or 10 minutes to respond to me, and I forget what I've sent them.
Yeah, and
so then I have to say, what did I ask you again? Because I get a yes answer. Sorry, Lorraine, you were saying...
No, I was going to say, when you were talking about your point there about them using social media, I have seen quite a few of them using the videos, you know, and maybe going out to a site and highlighting issues. So I think it's all to do with budgets as well. And it's important, we're intelligent enough to know that there is a big budget behind some of these candidates, and for others there's not. And I would like to think that people would see past that, you know. So if they see kind of 40 pictures of one face but one picture of another, that they're still...
They can filter out the 39.
Going to find out the information that they need to find out.
You're right. Generally, when it comes to local, I will vote for people I know. It's just, you know, it's just the majority of us do it. However, when it comes to the 2, 3s and whatever, or if there's for some reason I don't know local candidates, I will always put that vote down to the person who I believe came to my door and knocked on it. Now, sometimes it might have been a leaflet there, but if I know I've seen them, which can happen, you know, in the good weather, I will definitely give respect to that person for taking the time out and walking around. And
it does pay to knock the doors and not just hand the leaflets to the children.
I mean, I think on the poster side of it, the research says that a poster will not get you a vote, but still we have the megalomaniacs.
I read a study that says quite the opposite of it. Particularly for new candidates, it's about brand awareness. It is actually essential.
Well, I mean, if you believe that brand awareness does bring it into your head and makes you think about somebody, then obviously it will work. But I'm only going on what I've been told and what I've read, that posters are not what gets you votes. However, you know, a leaflet may get you votes. The amount of money, I think, is capped on what a person can spend. That's not to say that there's not some other route way, and I don't know how social media can, as we don't know how much you spend on that.
In the UK, there was a problem because it is capped on much, but actually social media went under the radar, online internet spending, and a lot of parties like went to town on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
some parties, particularly in online news media, are spending an absolute fortune.
Yeah, and we know what sprayed the venom of Brexit and venom of all the campaigns by using social media and, as you say, under the radar, and we bizarrely did not understand that this was happening, and we all fell for it, and now obviously we're aware of it, and we won't, I hope. But we're a country of about 4.5 million, and we have far too many politicians. I have no idea why we need them. And personally, I think local councils don't have any great teeth anymore. They have a certain amount of money that they can pass out to the communities that they represent. And for that reason, that's why people vote for whoever is active in their area.
You could have a budget of the mid-20s millions, and comes down to budget day, and councillors will be debating where 50,000 euro goes, and on the wider scale of it. But you talked, Mary, about, you think, how, and all of you can come on this, of course. You talked about how you think people would work out online and whatever. I am bombarded at the moment with people sharing that Argos have got 20 scratch TVs and they're going to give them away, that Curry's are doing the same, a holiday from budget travel's just been cancelled, and it's shared over and over to the point I actually just hide the original source from a newsfeed. So I don't know if people are really thinking objectively on social media like you say they should, or
it's hard to know.
Have. Because Argos aren't giving away 20 scratch TVs over the next hour.
I know people like to believe things regardless of how hard you tell them it's not true. False advertising, fake news. I've heard even, people that I would put down as being quite intelligent people saying, I believe blah, blah, blah has happened to somebody. And I said, well, where did you see that? It was on social media. Well, it must be true then, So, it's you're never going to stop people. We were just commenting before we came in about, the tabloid papers and what appears in those, and they still sell a lot of papers, and people still believe what's in them. And all of us that might be more critical in terms of what we do, we have a critical eye and a critical ear. Will sometimes see through that.
Lorraine Thompson, do you think we are generally becoming, more critical in our thinking in terms of social media? I don't think so. I don't think we've moved on one jot.
No, and it's interesting. We keep talking about Facebook, and maybe that reflects our age group here. Because if there was young people listening, Facebook is not where it's at anymore. It's more Snapchat and Instagram. So that mindless scrolling that we as adults
on Instagram, on Instagram it's the same thing. Someone, boy or a girl, will strip off their shirt to get up to about 2,000 likes, or they'll take pictures of their backside into mirrors, and then all of a sudden that content stops, and they start plugging health drinks at you, discount codes, and that's all going to use. And the people using Snapchat and Instagram are the very same falling for this lie, effectively. So it's a crossover. We're using Facebook, but you see the exact same stuff on Instagram.
But in terms of those things that you're talking about, people liking and sharing, the Argos, the holiday that nobody bought that's going for cheapest chips.
But in Instagram, but in Instagram, it's a dodgy old shake that'll do that.
There needs to be more transparency with regards to influencers, as you say, that have a brand awareness and then will plug a product. And a lot of the famous influencers there with millions of followers have been caught out by plugging products that they really have never used.
No research.
They haven't disclosed that they were getting large fees for there. So again, there's moves towards that. But Instagram actually is a very good. It's very good for advertisers. They actually have a lot, just the way the feed works, and you have a sponsored ad in there.
Every four stories is a sponsored ad.
Exactly, and Facebook is moving towards that now. The best thing to say to people is, if you're on a desktop or on your phone, is to install ad blockers when it comes to Facebook, and you will reduce the amount of sponsored content you will see.
But people are sharing these fake Argos.
Oh, well, that's different. If your friends are doing it, well, then your friends are you have kind of. Unfortunately, you don't have the cleverest friends. If you find that a lot,
my friends are lovely. They're just very trusting. They're very trusting.
But that's the problem. I mean, I see dumb stories.
And that comes down to the critical thinking.
I see dumb stories, and I see the ones which really do my head in is the false medical stories, which are harmful, where they share something and don't get your kid inoculized for this or that, something which is really dumb because they've seen it somewhere and they share it, and that is harmful, and that really annoys me.
Do you know what's interesting about what you're saying there, Kevin, and we'll go to you first in this one, Lorraine, is there's a lot of that, okay, but then what you get is there's a lot of very legitimate concerns, say for instance on 5G technology, that people, I know we've spoke about this before, but people are very, very genuinely concerned that these massive transmitters are going up in their local area, and they're getting these radiation machines, and they're going absolutely belupas and all that, and it's going in there and it's being mixed up with the chemtrails, and it's being mixed up, and I wonder if we're not maybe missing a trick here. Are you concerned about 5G at all, Lorraine, or is it something has come across your desk, so to speak? It
hasn't, to be honest, Greg. In terms of the young people that we work with, I know there's been no conversations about it. Obviously, for young people, their connections to the internet is crucial, and I think no more than adults, they're constantly plugged in and they're constantly looking for the best.
Their focus is how quickly can we get on it.
In terms of the impact on their health and things like that, it's not a conversation that is on their radar at the minute.
What about you? Because it's possible in your local town that one of these transmitters will be going up, because it's one of the solutions to sort of spreading out super fast.
Yeah. I believe the jury is probably still out on the effects of these. I'm not a scientist, but I have a very close friend who is a scientist, and he has carried out studies particularly on radiation. That is his job, and he says that there's more radiation when you're sitting in an aeroplane than there is anywhere else. Even in Chernobyl, where he did research and where the bleeps were coming up, when they were much higher when you were sitting in an aeroplane. Whether radiation does you that damage or not, I don't know, and I can't say, and he also can't say because he's not the medical person. But the level of radiation, the level of transmission, I would be concerned about it, because one thing that struck me recently, I had my phone beside my old-fashioned radio clock alarm, and every so often it was buzzing. And I thought, well, this buzzing is coming across my head as well, and children have, or not even children have but primarily would have their phones under their pillows. So, does that, the sun is radiation, so, does that radiation cause us harm? We don't know.
Okay. Well, we do know. 5G is safe. It's safer than 4G.
Why have Brussels banned it?
They haven't.
They have.
They haven't. They haven't. It's millimetre wave technology. It's non-ionizing.
This is where it goes into an area that I don't know.
Yeah, I will agree. I'm not saying
it's non-ionizing. The World Health Organization.
So you're saying that the Brussels has not capped 4G, because I couldn't get a 4G signal over there hardly. You're saying that they are allowing 5G into the city.
They are.
So where did that story come from?
It's a myth. It's a rumor. It's rumor mongering. It's scaremongering. There's no issue with 5G. It's safer than 4G. We have smaller cell towers, millimetre wave. It's non-ionizing. There is no issue. And I'm no pony in this race. If there was an issue, I could be on here saying it. There is no issue. It's and because I'm...
See, then as well, that there is pictures circulating of people up at 5G towers in white suits, right? And these white suits...
Oh, yeah, but that was rubbish.
Yeah, but they're spraying the towers and they're painting. But then people say that this is...
Well, that's absolutely...
You're right. I'm not a radio frequency engineer, but I've spoken to them. I work with engineers. I work with electronic engineers. There is no worry between us. Okay. What I am is a professional researcher. I've read the literature. I read the papers.
Mary and Kevin is wrong. 5G is 60 times stronger than 4G.
No, it's not. It's wrong.
Yeah, and what is strong? Stronger signal with no harm.
No, there's specific absorption rate for mobile phones, 1.6 per kilogram watts, and there is people. There is no smoking gun so far.
I welcome on anyone who will come on and explain with obviously some level of expertise their concerns, but what danger there isn't some evidence. You need a little bit of that, because you can only have balance if, obviously Kevin's come with, it sounds like a really decent argument, so you want from the other side someone not just to say, well, my conifer's gone brown. You'd have to have something a bit more.
Well, there are various there are various stories. Certainly, my colleague and friend who I have, he has a doctorate in radiation, and he's worked for a very long time in the field, so he knows what he's talking about when it comes to testing, levels. And as I say, he had levels tested at the general ground now around Chernobyl and in the aeroplane, and there. Airplane,
but we're only in an airplane here now and again.
Yeah, but what I'm also saying is that, for instance, this same person has said down in Mayo, the levels of which we all should be very aware of radon gas were, I remember at the time he gave me the figures, they were 5 times stronger than Chernobyl in the levels of radiation that were happening in a primary school where there were children and in the houses. It took a long time for the Department of Education to even acknowledge that, and the people who had the houses in the area refused to acknowledge it at all.
We had some problems with that in South.
The value of their homes would drop, and that was all they were interested in.
Like in 2011, the World Health Organization classed like mobile phones as class 2B carcinogenic. So you say, okay, my God, that causes cancer. But so would do pickles and aloe vera.
Okay.
You know, they're classed in the same 2B categories.
We have to take a break. Back with more shortly. A caller says, I have an app that stops that on my Facebook. It's brilliant. We referenced that earlier on. This government only gives us referendums which further globalist goals. I think quick divorce referendum is to accommodate their plans to increase immigration and speed up citizenship applications, convenience marriages, etc. Yes, Greg, on our local elections, it's not about policy. It's more about personality. Have a great weekend. Thanks, John. Greg, could you let me know on the divorce referendum, are we changing the amount of time you need to be separated or giving the politicians the right to choose the amount of time you need to be separated so it can be made shorter again sometime into the future? Well, they have put in a time frame, but this takes this out of sort of the legislative area, so changes can be made going through the proper processes in Parliament going forward, can't they? Or in the law going forward. Yeah, well, it takes away the 4 years and reduces it to 2. But it also it means that to reduce it to 1 would not require a further referendum, I don't believe, does it? That I don't know. I'll check. I don't think so. I think the idea of 2 years is the one that has been muted anyway. But that was to give us something to vote on, and probably to get it through. But I think it really now becomes a matter for exactly. Just briefly, Lorraine, interestingly, because we talked about fake news, and you, of course, are regional director with the Donegal Youth Services. Well, what is the situation as it relates to, young people, their absorption of fake news, their awareness of it? Because I think you're working on a project at the moment. We are, yes, Greg. We're working on a project with 2 other countries, with Greece and with Romania, and it's on the topic of fake news. The project is called Get It Right, and we're going to work with a group of young leaders. It was originally supposed to be with staff, and then we realised that when we're all of the one demographic, it's ultimately the younger people that know more about this than we do. So we're recruiting a group of like 18 to 25-year-olds, and they're going to work on a course for young people around fake news. So what does it mean? How do we recognise it? Maybe some examples of it. And they're going to come back and do like a peer education programme with young people. I think the biggest problem with that is for people to educate themselves, you have to point them towards a reliable source, right? And in some cases, let's say if it's medically related, it would be the WHO. But some people have such a distrust of the WHO that they don't see that as the legitimate source to sort of counteract fake news. Do you get where I'm coming from? Sure, and I think in this society, I think that's that like, the government or the HSE, don't trust the HSE, or we don't trust, you know what I'm on about? So that's and that's what I was saying. It's very difficult even as adults to navigate all of the news sources that we get. So obviously it's equally difficult for young people, or more difficult. But it is about having that critical eye sometimes and just being a little bit more cynical, not taking things at face value and doing your own research and looking in the different areas where you can and what's relevant for young people. And then obviously this project is about making it relevant for young people and encouraging young people to be a little bit more critical. I know we spoke earlier about Instagram, for example, and the celebrities like the Kardashians who will be promoting all of these, drink this and it'll make you thin. It's about asking young people to look a wee bit deeper than that and saying, well, why are they doing that? What's behind it? Money, obviously, usually is behind all of it, and getting young people to be a wee bit more critical, because then you're into the realms of, young people's own self-awareness, their own self-esteem, trying to match themselves up to these fabulous, stylish lifestyles, and maybe wanting a piece of that, but realising that it's all fake. One of the biggest participants in the likes of reality TV, Love Island, Big Brother, and the Jeremy Kyle show of late, are young people, the consumers of it, and also those taking part in it. Love Island has had very few guests really, and it has 2 people that have died by suicide, others suffering significant mental health. It hasn't really got the intention I believe it should, proportionately to the amount of guests Jeremy Kyle would have on, and one of those very sadly took his own life, and obviously it was a week after the show was recorded. It's not fully determined if they are directly connected, but that is presumed because Jeremy Kyle's show has been taken off air and it will never ever be back on air again, and it's not being aired going forward. Is reality TV, Kevin, dangerous? Or is this an overreaction? And I say that conscious that the man is no longer with us. But I mean, is it bubblegum TV and should never be on anyway? Or what's your view on the whole thing? Well,
reality TV is a broad spectrum. Of course, this particular show really was about the degradation of guests, really. But I don't like it. Never liked it. It's an ugly show. You don't want your kids to see it, but people like it. Again, so it's not on there without an audience. It's a top rating audience for ITV. It seems that they actually were grown sick of it as well. But the problem is,
I think it was probably a good time for them to sort of pull the pin as well.
Once you say you can't show on TV where the public may be exposed to confrontation or ridicule, where do you draw the line? Because, for instance,
you
within
an hour,
the
doll, for example,
you could be talking to someone, a politician, in the next 40 minutes, and you're as public interest, you're supposed to probe on certain issues. Now, what if you ask a question which ridicules him, becomes viral? I mean, in other words, I'm just trying to bring it. But where is the line drawn? Like, should someone come in next week and say, "Greg, actually, you upset councillor, whatever. You shouldn't have asked that question." So where is the line? And it's very difficult. But this particular show was not nice. It was exploiting people, even though they all voluntarily went on there. Again, there was crafty things done in the background, telling them that they were going to get a free lie detector test for 700 quid, that they were going to get a few nights in a hotel. So they were exploited for that. But still, they put themselves forward. But for me, no, it shouldn't be allowed, because these people...
Well, Big Brother should be Big Brother allowed. Should Love Island be allowed?
Big Brother
Made
is
in Chelsea.
Big Brother.
Obviously these some semi-scripted, but The Apprentice, for instance, people report leaving The Apprentice with incredible mental health issues. So all of those programs, like, where does it end? What is exploitative?
Yeah, we have had problems with a lot of those, but again, you can't say that people don't want to be on there, and then. It's entertainment.
Yeah, but what about, Lorraine, what about the acts that are selected for X Factor that are obviously not talented, but they're put on for the comedic value for the audience to laugh at them and to be ridiculed?
Their life story, and that's ultimately
how far should we go?
Well, I think, there's a huge appetite for these programs. The different programs that you mentioned there have a different age profile in terms of the viewership. The Love Island one, I watched it last year because I was curious. I missed the first year and everybody was talking about it. So I did watch it last year. It's particularly attractive to young people because of the young people that are on it are very glamorous. Their setting is very glamorous, and it's their true lived life on the show, allegedly, and the relationships and the encouragement, for them to make a relationship on the show.
But they start the show before any relationship is formed by putting two people in the same bed. I mean, that's the format of it.
And they change beds all the time throughout the show. And there is a huge conversation piece in workplaces, and it's not just young people, because it's not young people that work in our office, and everybody was talking about it. The impact of all of these shows is that people have gone from having a very private life to a very public life. And if they have put their own story in the media, then everybody knows or thinks they know this person. So then they can't have that private life that they had before. And ultimately, I think that is what happens. They have no control over their story anymore. If they get into the like of Love Island, there's paparazzi.
But is it for us to defend them? They knowingly, even on the Jeremy Kyle show, they know there might be some carrots, but they knowingly go into that program, right? I mean, where does it end if we sort of have a knee-jerk reaction? Where does this end? Like, Mary, I was watching briefly Watchdog the other night, okay, and there was a rogue trader, an individual fella, right, and he might have done bad, he might not, I don't know, but the BBC, chased him down the street, firing questions at him, calling him every name under the sun in terms of his character and his reputation and everything, and chased him to his house, to his business, okay? If he were to take his own life in 2 days because of what he went through, do we stop investigative journalism? I've never really been very comfortable with the way people are doorstepped and the way people have cameras shoved in the face. But do you get where I'm coming from?
I do, yeah.
Like, is he being exploited?
Yeah, I
do. Although he's not signed up for it.
I mean, when Kevin was talking about, you interviewing, let's say, a politician, the difference in that is that the politician puts himself forward. to be challenged in every way. So if you do that, you're doing that of your own accord.
But as they do to Jeremy Kyle's show, so we're being classist then?
Yes and no. Jeremy Kyle's show is, personally, I don't believe, reality TV to me is a real life documentary making real life TV. It is not the salacial, grossly disgusting programs that have percolated up through this, and they're all getting to the point at which they're pushing the boundaries as far as they can. Just because people watch them and just because people talk about them, you know, around the water cooler, does not make it right. You could end up with, God forbid ever happening, but you could get to the point at which people are saying, if I pull the trigger, is there a bullet in that gun? Will I kill this person? That's the level at which you're looking at reality TV.
So do you think it should be banned or filtered or what?
Absolutely. TV is, I believe, television is on in your corner. It's controlled by broadcasting companies, unlike social media, which are now getting their controls. It should be controlled tightly. It's not.
But if we
Ofcom are investigating this, and it certainly is something that has been allowed a very, very long string to do whatever they want, and all of those vulnerable people. As I would point out, we don't see any middle class people on these programs. We don't, and they're usually public school boys that are doing the challenging of what are vulnerable, unemployed people who are possibly paid. I don't know if the companies pay them to go on this show. I have no idea whether they do or don't.
They don't get paid though. But,
you know, so then, the sweeteners are, you know, and also I listened to the girl, one of the researchers on the Jeremy Kyle show, saying you were told to nerve up the people before they actually went into the studio.
In other words, like what you might do before you send a bull out to a bullfight.
Yeah, and this is not right. This is not good.
But Lorraine, the problem is that, you know, we're of different generations, but we're certainly, I think, above the generation that a lot of this programming is targeted at. You know, and on YouTube, for example, and how much of us know what our children are watching on YouTube. A lot of these massive YouTubers, a lot of their stuff is based on humiliating people, humiliating each other, humiliating people. So, you know, we could all take this stuff off what we're watching, but it ain't going to really address what our younger people are actually consuming and watching, really, for the most part. Like, my children have never watched any scheduled TV in their lives, and they're in their teens.
Yeah, it's not appealing to
them. And
them.
that's a fact, except maybe a football match, but never have they watched a single minute of scheduled television.
Yeah, because it's not appealing to them. And I think, whether we like it or not, reality TV is very appealing to people, and it's appealing to people of all different ages, because there's a particular demographic watches Jeremy Kyle when it's on in the morning, and whether you agree with it or not, they had a huge audience in the millions, I think. And the like of, I know you talked about Made in Chelsea and Towie, and that then hits another demographic of young people that watch that. And I know it's a little bit scripted, but people are making lifestyles out of this, and they're getting huge amounts of money, and there's lots of sponsorship. So there's a whole package. And when you talk about the other shows where people are coming on, but they're singing, their variety shows and stuff like that, they're catapulted into fame. And
but some of them are selected to be humiliated, and that's
taken.
That's the problem.
Taken their personal story. I think Jeremy Kyle.
No, but still, people that basically can't sing, and they go up and they stand in front of 300 people, and they're all laughing at them.
Yeah.
And, you know, like that. So I don't see any difference between that and the Jeremy Kyle show, to be honest with you.
But they're putting themselves forward.
But so are the people on Jeremy Kyle show.
I don't know how we can legislate against that.
This is the.
Well, I think it's the bullying on air on TV is the serious issue.
Kevin,
people do ask as well. It is mostly real. No, they do play games behind the scenes. People say, are they just... But actually, what you see in the Jeremy Kyle show is generally real. Also, people have asked about the lie detector test. Lie detector tests can work quite accurately in many cases. Now, they can be cheated by using sedatives, for instance, because, again, a lie detector works on your blood pressure, your heart rate.
I think you had a couple of Xanax before a lie detector test.
Exactly, and galvanic skin response again.
I never knew that.
But actually, what they did, which I didn't like as well, if there was a 50-50 reading on a lie detector test, they would go with the person lied again. So you should never go to that percentage. But if something was very high, you can kind of, with more confidence than 50-50, say, actually, that person is lying. But actually, the lie detector test, like I said, does work in a lot of cases.
Okay, listen, that's where we have to leave it. It's interesting. I wish we had more time. Mary Hart, broadcaster and journalist, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's always great to have you on. Lorraine Thompson, Regional Director with Donegal Youth Services. A pleasure to have you on board as well. Thank you.
Great.
And also Professor Kevin Curran, Professor of Cybersecurity at Ulster University. All three of you, thank you so very much.